Calificas para ser legal. ¿Quieres saber? Solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.
Good morning and welcome to the English version of our weekly radio show, Para Ser Legal, to be legal. Today, I don't know if it's a treat, but we're going to be talking about the crisis in the immigration courts, what it is, what's the cause of the crisis, and more importantly, how does this affect you? My name is Andres Mejer. I am a speaker, published author, and immigration attorney, and we have this weekly program to educate you, the public, about immigration and rights, responsibilities, options, and what's happening today and how really to prepare or affect it or in these trying times. So first, what is the immigration crisis? Well, it's the number of cases being handled is overwhelming. Give you an example. American Bar Association in 2010 was commissioned to do a study on the immigration system. They talked to government officials, they spoke to judges, they spoke to case officers, they spoke to attorneys, attorneys for the government, attorneys for private counsel, and they really looked at, well, what's going on with the system? Does it need reform or not? Is there any? And they made some really significant recommendations in 2010. Now, to give you an understanding, 2010 there was 262,000 immigration cases pending. In 2018, the report was just released a couple weeks ago. It was finalized in 2018. There were 760,000 pending immigration cases and about 350,000 being returned to court. So there will be a backlog of over 1 million cases. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means if your case used to take a year, now it might take 4 or 5. Why? The number of judges and support staff has not grown in conjunction with the volume of cases that are being handled. Now, when you have a huge volume of cases, either it takes longer or something's got to give somewhere. And the pressure being applied on the judges really gets pushed down to the immigrant defendants. Where, immigration courts has been defined as a traffic court dealing with life and death issues. Because if you're deported and you may never see your family again, that's a pretty significant decision. Kids that don't grow up with parents that don't grow up with their kids, that changes the trajectory of a family, no question. Life and death issues. So, couple of things that have come up that really cause a problem, like lack of due process. Good morning, Roy. So we're talking about quotas. Immigration judges now have quotas. They have to adjudicate 700 cases a year. That's on average of 3 cases for each workday, or it affects their pay. On top of that, if they get reversed by the Board of Immigration Appeals more than 15% of the time, it affects their pay. So that means judges are not willing to take chances. They're only going to do things where both parties agree, so the immigrant and with his or her attorney and the government's attorney. So judges are being squeezed. But it didn't stop there with the quotas, because if you can't hire more people, or you're not going to hire more people, you're just going to try to increase the productivity from your current staff. From a business perspective, that may make some sense, but you're dealing with people's lives here, and if you're telling a judge you have to decide this case, and you have to decide a certain number, or you might not keep your job, well, things that in the past you might have looked aside or you might have postponed, now you won't. You're just going to decide it because your livelihood now is on the line. So under the Trump administration, they've completely removed prosecutorial discretion. What's prosecutorial discretion? So after this program is finished, I need to go see a client who's been detained by ICE. I need to interview him and figure out, well, what are his options? Does he have defense strategy? Does he have criminal charges pending? We were just retained. I haven't met him yet. I need to go figure out what's the strategy, how are we going to help him, can we help him? Because we don't want to charge him if we can't do something for him. So let's say I get pulled over by a police officer. And let's say the officer pulls me over. Sir, did you know when your brake lights was out? No, officer, I had no idea. You were also speeding, so I pulled you over. He pulls my registration. He pulls my insurance, my driver's license. You know what? You haven't gotten a speeding ticket in 15 years. I'm not going to give you one now. I'm going to let you off with a warning. But I will give you a ticket to fix your brake light. Don't let it happen again. The officer just uses discretion to give me only one ticket instead of two. In the immigration context, let's say I'm in removal proceedings in front of an immigration judge. My wife's a U.S. citizen. She applies for me. The judge could, in his discretion, just said, you know what, I'm going to remand this case down to USCIS, the agency that deals with family-based petitions, and I'm going to wait to see what that agency does. And if they approve your petition, Mr. Mejer, then I'm going to close your case, and you're not going to be in removal proceedings anymore. Well, judges can no longer remand those cases down. Judges can't close cases either. So judges make a decision. So where in the past, my case would have been adjudicated by immigration, by USCIS, which is their job, that's what they do. Now we're going to have a full-blown trial in front of a judge, and it's going to take a whole lot longer and a whole lot more expensive and taking up the court's time when it's not necessary. So under Trump, no discretion, practically speaking, neither by the judges nor by USCIS. For example, under Obama, they prioritized who was going to be put in removal proceedings. For example, if I'm here 15 years, I have 3 U.S. citizen children, I've never been arrested, I have no criminal record, and I find myself in ICE custody, they will fingerprint me and say, Mr. Mejer, you're not a danger to society. Good luck, stay clean, and hopefully you'll be able to fix your options at some point. Not now. Now, so under Obama, the priority was those that just entered the U.S., recent entries, 3 years or less, or those with criminal convictions. What's a crime? Well, traffic ticket was not a crime. DUI has always been a problem. Assault, shoplifting, drugs, criminal convictions. If you're convicted, you're in trouble, you get placed in proceedings. If you weren't, you got released. Now everybody gets put in proceedings, no matter what. So, no priorities means everyone is a priority. On top of that, judges can't close cases. That means judge has less discretion. More cases being put into a system, less ability of a judge to manage those cases, and no new judges, or not enough new judges. The quota plus the removal of administrative closure is political pressure on judges to decide cases fast. So if you just tuned in, my name is Andres Mejer. Today we're talking about the crisis in the immigration courts, what's the causes, and how it affects you. So we went from 260,000 cases pending in 2010 to just over 1 million. Right now we're at 750,000, but they're adding those cases that were closed on administrative closure and bringing those back on. So that's going to bring it at 1 million. More than 4 times the number of cases in less than a decade. And I got to tell you, they did not hire 4 times as many judges. They did not build 4 times as many courts. This is a crisis of our own creation. This administration wants to break the system because they want to remake it in a different manner. Right now, most districts have judges. I believe they want to create a clearinghouse, a warehouse somewhere with judges, and have judges make decisions by video. You don't even see the judge. You don't see the public defender, you don't see the government's attorney. That's where they're going to go. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's due process. but that's going to have to be fleshed out. So let's talk about 4 specific decisions that were done by the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, that affects immigration courts. This is simply a lack of independence. What we're seeing is the political process make political decisions that affects immigrants' ability to stay in the United States. So, common misconception, immigration court isn't actually a court. Here in the United States, we have separation of powers. So in the federal system, you have the executive branch, the president, you have Congress, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate, and you have the courts, independent body. So if the president, if Congress makes a law, the president signs it into law to enforce it, and the courts can decide it's unconstitutional, it doesn't get implemented, period. In the state level, you have the governor, which is the executive, you have the courts, and you have Congress. You would think that immigration court would fall under the judiciary branch, the courts. Not the case. EOIR, Executive Office of Immigration Review, which is the immigration courts, is an executive agency under the president. Specifically, it answers to the Department of Justice. So the Attorney General can decide and change policy like that. So I'm going to talk about 4 specific cases and how it affects judges and how ultimately it affects you, the public.
¿Tienes temor a ser deportado? Les presento al abogado Andrés Mejer, autor del libro Califica para estatus legal en los Estados Unidos. Andrés, cuéntanos cómo tu libro puede ayudar a nuestro público.
Mi libro puede educar a las personas y ayudar a eliminar los miedos que causa la inmigración.
Ya lo sabe, llame por su libro gratis y el abogado Andrés Mejer también le dará una consulta gratis.
Solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.
Of the Department of Justice. They can fire them or hire them as long as they don't violate the law. There's very little limitation in hiring or firing, which is why they're implementing quotas, which is why they're preventing discretion. Because they're saying, listen, you don't do this, you get fired, or you're not going to get paid, or you're going to get paid less. It's going to affect you. You won't get a bonus. You won't get vacation days. You won't get, however employer can punish an underperforming employee. So the Attorney General at the time, Jeff Sessions, took these 4 decisions that have been addressed by the courts and said, I don't like their decisions. I'm going to review them, and issued an opinion differing, what's called a precedential opinion, meaning immigration judges now must decide cases like this the way I, Jeff Sessions, said it must be, overturning the judges and the appellate judges. First one, matter of Castro 2. That's a decision that got rid of administrative closure. That means that a judge, in the example that I gave, I'm in removal proceedings, my wife's a U.S. citizen, she's applying for me, judge says, you know what, I'm going to administratively close your case, I'm going to take your case off the docket, I'm going to let USCIS adjudicate the petition, and if you're approved, your case is closed and you're a lawful permanent resident. No more. Judges don't have the discretion to do that unless both sides agree, meaning the government's attorney, which represents ICE, and your attorney, because I don't recommend anybody be in immigration court without an attorney. Last week we spoke about that. 70% of clients that were of immigrants that were detained were not represented by an attorney, and the difference was you're 12 times more likely to win your case with an attorney than without an attorney. In the pilot that was done, only 4% of immigrants without an attorney won their case. With an attorney, 48% of immigrants won their case. Huge difference. So if you're in removal proceedings, somebody's in removal proceedings, do not go without an attorney. Obviously, not all attorneys are the same. Take a look at our program last week. You can find it on Facebook, or you can find it on our website for March 18th. And there we talk about why you need an attorney, when you need an attorney, how to find an attorney. So, matter of Castro Tum got rid of administrative closure. Matter of LABR, severely limited continuances. What does that mean? So, first court appearance, typically, judge will go through the pleadings and ask you what kind of relief you have, but if you don't have an attorney, historically, judge will say, you know what, I'm going to adjourn this once, I'm going to give you time to come back with an attorney. Sometimes they give you a second one. Your Honor, I was sick, whatever the reason is, you have to justify it. Now, not so much. You need to have a very high bar. It's always been good cause, but they've really limited it, what is good cause or not. Give you a perfect example. Let's say I have an asylum case, and I need to get documents from my home country. Well, you need to get those documents. You're here. Documents are over there. Sometimes you have to hire somebody to get those documents. That can take time. On top of that, you have to have it translated. That also takes time. Well, judge may not give you that time. So it affects immigrants' ability to prepare for trial. And without sufficient preparation, their chances of success go down even more. It's another tool for case management that immigration judges need. They should be able to decide, is it appropriate to adjourn a case or not? Now, because you need to decide 700 cases a year. You can't close cases. That's not a decision. And you can't continue cases. So that means let me get the trial as quickly as possible. Matter of AB. This decided whether criminal activity, private criminal activity, like domestic violence, can be a particular social group. In prior episodes of this program, we talked about asylum. What are the ways to prove it? There are three basic elements. One, you got to prove that you fear persecution in your country. Secondly, you're afraid of whom? Either the government or a group the government can't control. And three, so group the government can't control, that's private criminal activity. Government activity is not private, it's public. And three, the organization or the individual or the government is going to do bad things to you for a reason that's protected under the law. One of those is a particular social group. And they're saying domestic violence should not be one of them. So what did Jeff Sessions do here? He essentially said, well, let me look at a category of people, a category that many immigrants are applying and succeeding in proving those cases. And let me remove that possibility entirely. So what he says is, point blank, that type of case is not protected under the law. So if that's your claim, you will be denied and you will be deported. Now that there's other ways to present that same fact pattern, political opinion, you might fit under more than one particular social group. But point is, Jeff Sessions decided, I'm going to cut off an entire branch of cases. Now, last case that we're going to talk about is matter of EFHC. This case decided whether an immigrant gets a day in court at all. So let's say I entered the United States as a tourist, and I applied for asylum. So I came in with the intention to go back to my country, and then I said, listen, I'm afraid to go back to my country. Here's what's going on in a petition. So the way it works today, if I'm in removal proceedings, meaning I'm caught at the border, I get interviewed, I get placed in removal proceedings, I'm going to go in front of an immigration judge, and a judge is going to hear my case. But let's say I didn't do that because I wasn't caught at the border. I entered either illegally or I entered legally. And then I applied for asylum. I first go in front of an asylum officer. That officer will review my petition, will ask me some questions, and will decide, is there sufficient to grant relief? And if there isn't, will deny my petition. If I'm approved, obviously I'm approved. Life's better. If I'm denied, I get to go in front of a judge, and the judge I get an opportunity to have a judge hear my case and have a trial. Matter of EFHC, what the Attorney General is saying is, you don't get to go in front of the judge. You shouldn't get a judge to see whether you get a fair hearing or not. If you don't put enough information in your petition, they could deny you categorically and you could just be deported. So now A lot of applicants are filing asylum petitions without attorneys. They're just entered the United States. They don't know immigration laws. They don't know what they have to say or how they have to say it. If you don't know what they're looking for, how can they hold it against you if you don't tell them in a way that you need to? It doesn't mean you don't have a valid claim. It just means you haven't presented it in the appropriate fashion. And that is why only 4% of immigrants in removal proceedings without an attorney win their case. They don't know how to properly present it. And they don't give the judge the information the judge needs to approve their case. And because of that, they get denied and get deported. So, for those of us who's just tuned in, my name is Andres Mejer. Today we're talking about the crisis in immigration courts, what are the causes, and how it affects you. So we said, listen, the crisis is the number of cases that are pending are going to be approaching 1 million. It's gone more than 4 times in the last decade alone. And why is that happening? Because there's no discretion. There are more cases being put into the system. There aren't enough judges to hear this volume of cases. Quotas are being put on the judges. They have to hear 700. They have to decide 700 cases a year. That means on every workday they have to decide at least 3. Judges can't adjourn cases. Judges can't close cases. And there are certain types of relief that immigrants are no longer eligible to request in the asylum context. That is what is being done in the immigration court system. It is a lack of independence. It is clear political goals being done to limit immigrant population and immigrants, period. There's no other conclusion you could draw from this. It's clear that the Trump administration is looking to break the system and probably wants to mold it differently in some fashion. We'll see whether that happens or not. But how does this affect you? Well, before we get to how does it affect you, recommendations. So, American Bar Association had commissioned a study in 2010. They published those decisions. In 2017, they commissioned that same organization to update their recommendations. And they did that and released it just a couple weeks ago. And what they said is, listen, it's clear that the Immigration Justice and Department of Justice employees, they have limited protection from political interference. The Attorney General can overrule decisions, which is absurd. Immigration courts should be what they call an Article 1 court. The recommendation is you make it the same thing like bankruptcy court and the same thing like tax court. It's separate and apart from the Department of Justice. It's a separate body that's, the head judge, the chief judge, or the assistant chief judge is appointed by the president with advice and consent of the Senate. They have terms of 12 to 15 years. And politics can less affect an outcome because the Attorney General can't say categorically you do this or you do that. They said the lack of independence is so bad that the American Bar Association is recommending do not hire any new immigration judges until you change the system. That's how bad it is, because they say the hiring process is now becoming politicized. You're not going to be a judge, an immigration judge, unless your views are this way. Well, that's not what our system should be about. That's the American Bar Association's recommendations after doing an exhaustive study, speaking with judges, speaking with support staff, with government attorneys, with government agencies like Department of Homeland Security and USCIS and Executive Office of Immigration Review, Board of Immigration Appeals, and also some private counsel. What needs to be done? And their recommendation is the courts must be independent. They must be free for judicial interference. There is a fundamental lack of due process. There's a real risk that immigrants are not getting their fair day in court. And that's not right, because immigration court will decide your life. Period. And it should be fair. And it should be just. They also say, like in the criminal system, you should have an attorney. The government should pay, if you can't afford one, to have someone defend you in court. That's the American Bar Association's recommendations. Now, let's talk about how this affects you. In the last couple of minutes that we have. If you have questions, you can always call us at 888-888-0307. You can find us with videos like this at Facebook Live. On Facebook at Andres Mejer Law, or on our website, andresmejerlaw.com. So let's talk about how this affects you. Let's talk about, these are real cases that we have, but I've changed the names to protect their privacy. So Jose was a police officer in his country. He worked specifically against narco trafficking and cartels. Him and his family were threatened with violence. There were attacks to him. There were attacks to his family to try to keep him from doing his job. So he had a visa to enter the United States. He came to the United States and he applied for asylum. Now, he went in front of an asylum officer, and the asylum officer said, the law does not protect police officers. 100% wrong. We went in front of an immigration judge, and that judge, who was formerly an asylum officer, knew asylum very well, said that is categorically incorrect, and will give him his day in court. Problem is, his day in court is 3 years from now. His next court appearance is in 2021. I guess only 2 years from now. And then we'll choose the trial date. So even though we have the petition filed, even though we have all the proofs, even though we, as representing the immigrant, are ready to proceed to trial, the government attorney asked for more time to review his criminal background. There's nothing there, but they asked time to do it, and the judge gave it to him. So if I asked for more time on my client's behalf, I would likely be denied. But because the government asked for it, it was granted. So 2021, his next court appearance. Best case scenario, that day, he gets given his trial date. So that could be 2023. So we're looking at 4 or 5 years until he gets his trial date, until he can get a chance to win. And only a year after that will he become a lawful permanent resident. So it's postponed the process by 4 or 5 years. But at the end of the day, his situation is relatively secure. He has a really good case. He has lots of proofs on the hardship, proofs on the nexus between what occurred and the fear. I mean, he's afraid because he was attacked before. So there's a real likelihood if he comes back, he'll be attacked again, and so will his family. So he has a good case, but it's justice delayed. Let's talk about Miguel. So Miguel is a different scenario. He's been here for a number of years. He's married to a U.S. citizen, but he's entered the United States multiple times, so his wife can't petition for him. He's inadmissible for that reason. We've talked about that. He's inadmissible for 10 years. But he's applying for what's called cancellation of removal for non-permanent residents. What that means is he has to prove 4 things. That he's been in the United States more than 10 years since his removal was initiated, that he's a good moral person, that he's not been convicted of a crime that would disqualify him, and he needs to show extreme and unusual hardship to a qualifying relative he's deported. His wife's a U.S. citizen and they have 2 kids. Problem is, they have no real hardship. So, yeah, we could show financial issues. Yes, there's some emotional issues, but not really. They're a good family. They're in a good economic situation. There's no medical issues for the children or his wife. So he doesn't really have. If tomorrow he has trial, he runs a real risk, no matter what the attorney is, that he might lose. Lots of discretion on the judge. Now, last year he had his first court appearance. Now, mind you, he was placed in removal proceedings in about 2014. So in 2018 he had his first court appearance, and it snowed. Court was closed. Okay. They moved his court date to 2019. January. Here comes January. Again, for the first court appearance, what happens? Government's shut down. Okay, no court. They gave him another date. His next day is 2021. That's for his first court appearance. So chances are he's going to have another 2 court appearances or so, max, before trial. He's looking another 4 or 5 years before he gets trial. Now, in Miguel's scenario, time is good. His kids are young. And today, there's no real hardship. 4 or 5 years from now, maybe he will have a hardship. Maybe he will be able to prove something because circumstances will change, or the law will change, giving him a benefit. So in Miguel's scenario, the longer it takes, the better. Let's talk about Maria. She's also going to be filing for cancellation or removal. But her case was administratively closed. So she had the misfortune of hiring a really bad criminal defense attorney. She was convicted of driving without a license, a traffic violation. And this attorney, will remain nameless, pled her guilty, and she went to jail for a day. In jail, ICE took her and put her in removal proceedings. She had 3 U.S. citizen children. 2 of them were 16, 17 years old. 1 was younger. We were able to show how those kids were emotionally affected. Unfortunately, some of them had wet their bed. They weren't sleeping. They were depressed, being apart from mom. So those kids were really affected. Trial was adjourned more than twice for reasons not of our own. I mean, back when this case came up, there were only about 4 immigration judges. When now there's about 8. There were some that had retired, some that had moved to different jurisdictions. So cases were being shuffled about, and we didn't know who the judge was or where they was. The government offered to administratively close the case, and our clients agreed, because what was the point of keeping on going? You didn't know who the judge was, you didn't know what the case was, and there really wasn't a lot of equity. Meaning the kids were, this is 4 years later, so yes, they had some issues back then, but the expert didn't really agree that when the trial was coming up, would still have those problems. But at least they could have made a claim. And they decided, you know what, let's not take the chance. She'll stay with work authorization and keep it. Well, now that case is going to be reopened. And now her kids are over 21, which means she doesn't have a qualifying relative. So in the past, she was able to at least make a claim. Today, if the government reopens her case, she can't even do that. So now so let's say that it gets reopened, she has trial tomorrow. Well, those 4 years made a big difference in her case, because 4 years ago, her kids were under 21 and were qualifying relatives. Today, they are not. And 4 or 5 years from now, it gets even worse. So every case is different. Some people benefit from a delay in the process. Others are hurt by it. But one thing's for sure, you shouldn't have to wait 5 years for your day in court. That's a long time to have that weight on your shoulder. What kind of plans can you make? Can you buy a house? Can't you? Should you have kids? Shouldn't you? Your life is on hold while you're in removal proceedings. You don't know where you're going to be living. You don't know what you're going to be doing. It's not right, and it shouldn't happen. And it didn't need to happen, and it doesn't need to happen. But this administration has done it intentionally. It's clear the decisions that are done to prevent discretion by the judges, to apply pressure to the judges to adjudicate cases as fast as possible. That means less time for preparation. That means less time for immigrants to put their cases together. And in some cases, less opportunity to even have an attorney at all. What is going to happen? For example, let's take Maria's scenario. Let's say she moved. Let's say that the court now reopens that case and sends her a notice to appear. She no longer lives at that address. Well, when that date comes and goes, she's going to have an order of deportation. And here she thought that her case was closed. She didn't even know. Those things are going to happen. Mark my words. So I'm Andres Mejer. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Today we spoke about what's the crisis in the immigration court system, what were the causes of the immigration court system, and how it affects you, the immigrant who's in removal proceedings. If you have questions, you can always give us a call at 888-888-0307. You can find us at Facebook at Andres Mejer Law or on our website, andresmejerlaw.com. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Until next time.
Calificas para ser legal, ¿quieres saber? Solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.